All right, we'll get started with the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Welcome to the South Burlington School Board meeting. And we just had an opportunity to enjoy a lovely community spaghetti dinner in the cafeteria, and I believe that is supporting the fifth grade activities. Great.
And Holly will be down just to say a few words in a few minutes. She's just saying goodbye and,
Right.
checking in with everybody as they go.
All right, good. Any comments from the public regarding items not on the agenda? All right, seeing none, David, do we have amendments to the agenda?
We need to put under item number 10, we have action for the high school elevator. High school and middle school elevator upgrade. It's actually the high school. And so there's an RFP that needs to go out, and we'll go over that in more detail when we get to it.
Okay, anything else?
Nope.
Okay. All right, we don't, will our student representatives be here? We can defer that item.
Yep, I haven't heard. I thought
Okay.
they were going to be here, but.
All right, if they do
something
come,
may
we'll
have
just
come up.
defer that. So we'll shift into item 6 on the academic calendar.
So the calendar discussion, again, this is, you have it, it's not up for action tonight, but there's been a fair amount of questions that have come forward to the board around particularly what we call non-common days. And we are obligated within the Champlain Valley to have 175 common days. And then, obviously, by contract, we have variation that requires certain districts to add additional days up to the required contractual amount. We have 180 days, so we have to find those 5 other days. In the calendar, we identify these non-common days, and that allows you the choice, essentially, to add that as a day or not. And so in the calendar, particularly to, for instance, the September 23rd date is one that's marked as a non-common day. This happens to be a day when Yom Kippur, I never quite say that right. Sorry, I'm looking at you, Stuart. But never quite say that quite right. But that's the day that happens. We are choosing to keep that as a school day, and feel that a couple things here that are important to respond to folks. We certainly recognize that it's a holiday. In the past, I think we've not necessarily been as consistent as we could be around these days by having student activities, assessments sometimes, concerts, sporting events, and other activities. And so this day, we've recognized that it falls there, and we'll make sure that there's not going to be student activities, assessments, etc. The other part of this is that when students are out, obviously, we have an obligation to mark them accordingly, tardy, excused, or unexcused. And so one of the provisions in our ability to track attendance is that we can mark them a religious occurrence. And so that is used. It's available. Again, I gave you some data to this tonight. Actually, I don't know. I sent it to you. I don't know that I gave it. I don't think you have it at your place. But it kind of gives a little bit of the history of the number of days that have been used.
David, does that include other religious observances for other high holy days?
That's correct. Yep.
For
So
all
that's
religions?
Yeah, so that's actually, it is used. You can see that it's used. Again, one of the areas, and again, central office, we've talked about making this more informed with the rest of the administrators as well, just so that folks are aware of that.
Sort of a follow-up on that. This doesn't look like it's inclusive of all religious holidays.
This sheet does not. This is particularly to the Jewish holidays, which are some of the responses that some of the board members have
Okay,
received
what-
most recently.
Do we have any experience with others?
This came out.
Well, how about, I think Dan's asking about student absences due to other holidays.
These are the summation of absences, so it could, we're
Am I
talking
looking
about.
at the same sheet you're looking at?
Yeah.
Mine is specific to 2 weeks in 2014 and 2012.
Right.
So what we've done is just, again, looked at, these particular dates, wanting to highlight the concern particularly that's been brought to your attention by a good number of community members, and so wanted to make sure that that you were aware of that. We haven't looked at across the board every single day of the calendar and what might be going on with absence track, but certainly we want to make this more known to community members.
How do we educate families about if they're choosing to observe a holiday and call their child in absent? How do we indicate or educate them around specifying that it is a religious holiday? Or what's your
Yeah, it's a good question. I think it's not something that we do a lot of broadcasting about.
I definitely have gotten some feedback this week that parents didn't know that
No,
they needed to
yeah.
say that, and then it was counted as a different
Yeah,
kind
so
of
I think
absence.
that the right way is that when somebody's calling in an absence on any one of any sort of a religious observed holiday, that we prompt generally our first responders to that to say, are you out because of and announce that particular holiday. And if that's the case, then, and they affirm that and aren't surprised by that, then we would mark it accordingly.
We typically do ask for the reason
Yeah,
for
so-
absence, because the nurse likes to keep track of illnesses and.
But like at the high school, you can just call and say they're not coming in today.
Right, and you may leave a message.
You
or
may leave a
something, right.
message, so it's a little, yeah.
So, just so you
Go
know,
ahead,
I
sir.
did check with Denise Weaver, particularly about this, because she generates the letters
Okay.
for tardies and more than 5 or 10
Right.
absences. And so if they know, even if the parent or guardian didn't say, they do mark, and if you look at the actual absences from 2012, which is the last time that Yom Kippur was on a school day,
Right.
you'll see that it's only like 2 or 3 people more absent than the day before who are not marked as
Okay.
RO in our records.
Okay.
So, whether they were marked at that time or whether they were marked later because, somebody called up and said, I got this 5-day out letter, and one of those days was a religious observance, it would be corrected, so.
Okay.
So anyway, there are some takeaways, I think, from this, and that we are more consistent in making sure there's some consistency around when people are calling in an absence, that we're consistent in our response across the district on making sure that there's an acknowledgement of whether or not this is a holiday for you or your family.
and is it in our current manual, I'll say, for parents and guardians, just what the absentee policy is, that they should expect a letter if their student is absent 5 days,
10.
however, or 10 days. However, if there are religious observances, if those are called in, they don't count
Don't get
against
count,
that,
right.
yeah.
I don't know that I do not know that we're consistent across the entire district around that particular entry in the handbook, and that's an area that we should indicate what RO means and leave it at that. So we should be consistent. So that's definitely a takeaway as we move forward. Again, the sensitivity here is that we want to certainly honor family, but we also are needing to be sensitive to how we will continue to get the number of days in that we need to get in for school, and being respectful of all.
One of the obvious questions I have, and I know this is a difficult to navigate to some degree, but if administration's making the recommendation to have kind of no assessments or activities which a student might miss on a specific day, and in this case you're highlighting September 23rd to us, what is the criteria that you would use to assess whether there be no assessments or activities on any other holy day? And I've got kind of the interfaith calendar here that is pretty substantial.
Yeah.
In fact, I think I went through and there might be about 60 days left for school if,
There are actually 114 different days in that list.
Yeah.
Right.
Some of them are celebrated by several religions, but there are 114
yeah.
listed there.
So
34 primary ones and 114 total different days.
yeah, I think that one of the part of this is that we publish a calendar, that we may remain as sensitive as we possibly can to the population and that we serve. We look at what we would say perhaps the highest or most valued religious days that might be within the faith, and we work hard to not have, major conflict on those days, and major conflict being, major student activities or assessments and things of that nature. So,
Does that include co-curricular activities?
right.
So if there were a football game that night, you wouldn't have a football game?
Well, again, that's part of the conversation right now, and we've exercised this in the past, is that we've tried not to, again, we've had some misses in this, so I'm not wanting to say we've done this all right. But our desire is to try to work to make sure that we don't put a religious holiday for our community on a day when a student is going to feel pulled between a school-related activity, co-curricular activity, an assessment, et cetera. And
So can that be a Chittenden County-wide, about sports? Even testing, is what you're saying, there will not be any assessments? Because the problem is, from a parent perspective, that what I'm hearing is that, especially as the kids get older and they have a game or they have a test that they're gonna have to make up, they wanna go to school and do
Just
that.
do it.
And it's a family problem then,
Yeah.
so.
Well, part of the issue is we definitely have, obviously, we're a pretty small state, but we do have, pockets of religious concentrations in certain areas. And so what might be in Burlington is, and I'm not going to say extremely different, but different than our population. We need to be mindful of that, although our databases, and rightfully so, we don't go out and target what religion you are, But we certainly are aware, and as the Stuart said, and some of the data reports here, we know pretty much, where there's going to be conflict based on our.
Are we in fact free to make such accommodations? Or are there restrictions on what we can do?
As far as what, Dan?
Well, effectively recognizing a religious holiday within a public entity.
No, it's not so much recognizing, it's just ensuring that we are mindful of the students that would
But
be.
you suggested there would be special if I heard you right, you suggested there would be special accommodations for those people who missed that day.
Right. So special
For a
accommodations.
religious observation, okay.
Right. Special accommodations
And
would be.
I think there may be difficulty in linking it to the religious holiday, that's my concern.
Right, so the religious observance, determination on what we say on the absence, when that's declared, when we know that it falls on a day, like in the case of the September 23rd upcoming, we're going to do our very best to make sure that there's not going to be events that are going to pull the student.
How are we gonna
That's the accommodation.
differentiate that date from other days that may pop up?
Yeah, again, we're looking at the most observed days. We're looking at some of the trend data that we've had and trying to make sure that we're.
Well, I'm
getting
doing a
our
little
180
research,
days.
I'm doing a little research about this. What I've found is that when this issue pops up with one religion, it starts to pop up for other religions, okay? So the question is, we need to have, in my opinion, a clear policy as to how we're gonna decide, should that happen. So, anyway, that's my 2 cents.
Stuart?
Yeah, I just want to say 2 things. One is in terms of the scheduling of sporting events. All the athletic directors in Chittenden County at least, are looking at these days to try to build sports schedules that have the least amount of conflict. Obviously, everything is not always possible. In terms of assessment, the assessments that moved out of the fall, remember kneecaps used to be in the fall, and that was an issue for a number of years that are no longer an issue because it's a much bigger window in the spring. So the ability to move the assessments is much greater without, even if there are other things that happen in the spring with different groups, there's much more flexibility than a 3-week window with a 12-week window. So.
Yeah, when kids are worried about assessments, they're not worried about kneecaps, they're
No,
worried
no.
about exams or
Right,
tests
no.
that they're having.
And the other thing, all I can say is I know that Mr. Burke every year has sent out letters to teachers reminding them of a variety of things that are coming up and to try to be sensitive.
I
Which
think
is really
that's
all you
across
can be in the long run, is try to, we look at things, I know that, for example, 1 year at the middle school, because the days, some people have turned it down, you know, the photography person
Yeah.
convinces the person, oh, here's a good day. And, you know, they don't look and say, oh, that's religious holiday on the calendar. And when it's pointed out, then the day gets moved, you know, but those are the kinds of things, because, you know, it is a lot. But it's the intent to try to keep that to the minimum, and for all groups, and there are more groups, you know, changes the conversation.
I want to get back to something Elizabeth said about educating families when they call in an absence to be sure that we're letting families know that they can take time off for a religious observance and that we're consistent with whatever religious observance it is, that families know so that it's not counted against that 5, 10, and 15 number.
Yeah, I think that's a valid point.
Yeah, I think, you know, the handbook, making sure that people are better informed about the religious observance, you know, opportunity to call in on attendance. I would encourage at this point that, you know, we don't quickly rush to a policy, but we are sensitive to, you know, looking at this on an annual basis and providing the feedback as we go through the year. Again, in a year from now, we could have a very different population that would be in need of, and if we then have a situation where we have, I'm going to say, half of our student body are going to be out, then it would be disadvantageous for us to try to hold school
Yeah, but then
on that
it
particular
becomes a
day.
different issue than a religious
Correct.
holiday issue. Becomes
And
a,
so part of this is, you know, looking at that number. We don't really know, you know, because we don't ask, but by some trend data and what we see for absences and feedback through the administrators, we look at the calendar and that, through that lens. So,
And one thing I would suggest when administration sort of looks at the best response to this, I think the intent to have no assessments or activities on various holy days, I think the education of staff to solicit info and education of parents and guardians through the student handbook around the current policy and the implications of not calling in a religious observance. But I also think the criteria, I don't think it's our role to sort of get into the criteria of valuing religious observances by maybe the sheer numbers within a district, because I think that diminishes the demographics in the district and so forth. So I think we've actually got a lot of tools available to us that could represent, when we do set a calendar, just recognizing through the various notes we have here, where we know if it's one and if it's 50 families that might be affected. I do think it's respectful to acknowledge that we're aware, and I think that's part of the efforts we have a district has made through the We Belong program is really awareness building.
yeah. So it's not on here for action. Again, those are 3 pretty clear takeaways from you, and we'll bring it back. We also have some things we need to do in addition to the calendar. We have to put on some assessment or teacher learning days, which are usually those late start days and elementary half days. And that's going to be an area that we're going to push those days in there, and you'll get a chance to see those ahead of time. I will tell you that you'll likely see some additions to those late start days, just with some of the things that are going to be happening throughout the year around implementation of, particularly at the high school and the middle school. So you'll likely see probably 2 additional days, 2 additional late start days.
And when does the calendar come before the board? for
We
action?
will put it, I think you're going to see it on your next meeting. We have it on the next agenda for action. Again, it has to be done in March.
are
So
are the common days agreed to at this point?
common days are agreed to, and the non-common days.
And you indicated that there was a way to tell which of these were non-common? I don't see that.
Yeah, so on this one, you'll see, let me see, it should be bracketed, September 23rd. Where is it? For
On
instance.
my sheet, there's no differentiation between 22nd, 23rd, 24th.
Yeah, so it just shows that it's an
There's a
in-school
note-
day.
There's a note down in the lower right.
Yeah, so this one does not denote where there's common and non-common days. it doesn't really make sense to the average reader what a common and non-common day is. We could certainly, I mean, I can let you know which, I can show you which ones those are, if you'd like. In a copy. Again, this is the one that we do more regionally on common and non-common days.
Okay. All right, any other questions or comments? All right, we'll move on to agenda item 7, the city-school collaboration.
So we have a lot of collaboration going on. We have missed our meetings, but we have another one coming up. I know maybe we have a conflict actually on the February, but there's a lot going on, and I probably would just move into the kind of just confirming some of the activity that's currently going on with master planning and vision. We're going to talk about that later. A lot of that, though, is, you know, the need to map out how we continue to keep both the council and the board informed. I was pleasantly pleased by, had 3 board members, just for a second, at the last steering committee meeting, so I appreciate that attendance. But certainly how we navigate that is going to be a big part of our city and school collaboration going forward, so.
When
anyway,
is the next committee meeting?
Tuesday.
Yeah, next Tuesday.
What's that date?
And is there going to be a problem with multiples of us being at that meeting?
Well, if there's 3 there, it enters into, you know, it really should be warned. The meeting is warned, you know, but I should be more sensitive to not, if you're going to
I
3
don't
be
think
there.
it has to be warned because
Well, the meeting is
is
warned.
I mean, our attendance is irrelevant because there's no conversation. We're
Right,
just
where it would
observing.
get difficult if somebody asked questions and then, you know, you responded and you know, and then it started into a conversation, that could be
Well,
looked
that
upon as-
hasn't been,
Hasn't.
that isn't a
No.
ground rule of those meetings.
No, no, so I think it's fine, I mean, you know,
And what time does that start?
they start at 5,
At City Hall?
correct, 5, yeah,
Okay.
5 to 9.
Okay.
So the other item under here is around city-school collaboration is appointing the representative for the Chamberlain Neighborhood Airport Planning Committee. And this one does, you know, I would like action on this just because it could be more formal around who's going to be appointed to that. We did talk about this at our last administrative meeting. And I had previously, I think, shared with you that Karsten is willing to step forward if the board's so willing to serve in that capacity. Really don't have a lot of information around the frequency. We have some from Kevin, but don't really know all of the details around what that will look like, how many meetings. What I might suggest, although, you know, Carson probably can just report back under this particular area, whether it's in quick note form or come, but report out under that agenda item in the future under city and school collaboration as a kind of a bullet point. He's happy to do it, well, at least he is now anyway, but happy to be part of that.
And he lives in the neighborhood.
That's right, he does.
Great.
Great.
So that's Carson Slender, he's the middle school principal.
So do I have a motion to accept administration's and Karsten's appointment as representative to the Chamberlain Neighborhood Airport Planning Committee?
So moved.
Second.
Any more discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Great.
Motion passes.
Thanks.
And thank you to Karsten for stepping up.
So maybe Holly is here. Did you want to just report out a little bit? Skipping back, maybe Elizabeth, would that be all right, around just kind of the end celebrations? Certainly your building was busy tonight with a lot of activities going on.
Yes, I
We'll
hope
say
you enjoyed our
celebrations.
annual family night here at Chamberlain School. Hopefully you got a chance to see some of the happenings that were going on. We had some UVM scientists and UVM basketball players, UVM hockey players. We had a therapy dog that was here early from 5 to 6 as well. Just a way to kind of bring the community in together and have a meal, spaghetti dinner, which is a fundraiser for our 5th grade fun day at the end of the year. But also just to kind of instill that love of reading and getting community members in who are good role models around reading. So I hope you enjoyed the evening.
Glad the timing worked out so that we could just prefix the meeting here with that.
Yeah, it was great.
Yeah, thank you.
Thank you.
All right, we'll move on to agenda item 8, master planning financial stewardship.
So, again, as I said earlier, 3 of you were there, so you have some context of what was going on, but for those that were not there, I would say this is a very, very active group. Has had a whole lot of conversation around many, many options. Holly serves on the committee, as well as Pat Burke on behalf of the school side. We have some other teachers on too, Cindy Tan. Who am I missing? Quick off the top of my
I
head.
think it's just Cindy. isn't
Yeah,
it?
so Cindy representing also. Currently, there was 18 options in front of them, and they've basically, through a survey process, narrowed it to, I'm going to say 8, and then further down to, I'm going to say 4 or 5 with sub-options in each one of those, whether they're sub-options meaning like a grade configuration change, et cetera. So currently, we're in the process. We met today, John, myself, Annette Harden, Tom Hubbard, Kevin Dorn, and Lee Dorr, and began working on kind of a cost model that would allow us to provide some validation back to both the council and the board and to the community, really, through the next community forum, kind of what those options really look like.
Is it capital cost that you're looking at?
So we're looking at, really, to the best of our ability, to try to wrap it all in together. What we know right now is that we currently have, systems running, which we may be calling the baseline. All schools, all operations currently may be determined, this is the baseline. And then anything from the baseline, whether they're capital changes in cost, maintenance or deferred maintenance and stewardship plan that either stays on or goes away, those all become, cost changes or variables that we'll need to look at.
Will staffing be one of the variables?
So certainly staffing, so obviously in a model where it goes into a consolidation, you can't say everyone can go away, but there is some level of efficiencies or a percentage of efficiencies that will be noted in there.
And are you gonna net it for the existing capital things? I mean, for
So it's
example,
not- it's
if
not-
this school were not on the,
Right,
in one of the scenarios, were not included,
right,
there are some maintenance costs associated with this building, some sustaining costs.
right. So that would be,
Those would be netted in that scenario?
right, or those would be our kind of cost avoidance, which would be netted to the positive.
Okay.
For part of the options, it's the repurposing of the schools that would go back to the city. So then the city essentially has to kind of own those responsibilities. So it's kind of a net neutral, a shift to the city away from the school. So again, it's complicated for me to
Yeah.
tell you exactly what, that I have it all right. Definitely my desire is when we go to the community in a community meeting, that they see what the option is. They see what the opportunities are for city and school and what's a cost measurement, if you will, around that option. And so they can say, hey, 4 or 5 options, which would help then, inform the task force, which would then inform the board on where we go. So, I mean, I'm pleased with the process. It's a little bit of, there's a lot going on. A lot of time is being spent really to ask a lot of really critical questions. And a lot of it, of course, comes right back to our staff around, whether it's demographics, whether it's cost modeling, whether it's financial things, whether it's stewardship. And so, as you know, this is a busy time, and we're right to be doing it. It's just, I would say cities in the same boat. But it was absolutely the right thing to do, to have this conversation. A lot of people are talking about it. Again, I had spaghetti dinner tonight with one of the parents here that was asking about that to me, about what's going on and how did that relate to 5th grade. I think Martin was with me there a little on that. But so certainly the conversations are out there, and we're working hard to push out information through kind of a quick press releases that go out to moms and dads and guardians on a more regular basis about the task force work. So
that's been going out already?
yeah, so again, posted out on the other paper. There's been pushes, tweets have been going on through Patrick.
One thing aren't the committee updates on the city website?
Correct.
Can we link
We're gonna have our link up on the, so it bounces to the
district?
city.
Okay.
It's there now, you can get there, it's a few more clicks. but
Yeah,
Right.
it's buried on our left
It's
bar.
not,
and
it's not one click to it,
Yeah.
but you get you there. But the other thing is the minutes, even the draft minutes are a little out of date. The last one is 2 meetings ago.
So again, part of that is the frequency of the meetings. They've almost had them once a week, and again, the city has agreed to do the minute taking, so.
And I know the calendar's been pushed a little bit, but when are they anticipating that first community meeting?
So we're looking at March right now,
Okay.
and part of that was driven by, if you're gonna go to the community, we kinda need to have as much information about each option. You know, you can't just say, oh, here's an option, oh, it looks nice, you know? You're gonna need more information. Obviously, the opportunities, what the option is, again, opportunities, city and school, but you gotta know what's the impact, you know, to me, the taxpayer. So we feel that that's an essential part. We're a little bit worried around, the accuracy and how we report those options, because there's so many moving parts in some of that, particularly with the city center and what might prevail as within the TIF district and what kind of revenue would that generate. And so that can get really messy. So, putting an exact number to it would be difficult. So there's gonna be some, percentage kind of increase type thing is kind of what we decided today. But John, Annette Harden, and Tom, and Lee Dora are working on this, I think Friday, John? Friday or Monday?
Yes, sir.
Something like that.
Yeah, I have to say, that was the first group, or first meeting I was able to attend, and the work of the group was impressive, I have to say. It was really a lot of energy, a lot of focus, a lot of really bright people asking really relevant questions. And the way this particular 18 option scenario that David mentioned was actually an intercommittee assessment of those options. So they went through a pretty rigorous process of putting the options into common buckets. It became pretty clear there were certain categories that things fell into. So it's a really rational approach. I can appreciate your comments about, and the committee brought this up, about not wanting to go to the public until there is some frame of reference that balances, as we have as a board have given direction to the committee in the scope of the project. It's really, are you preserving and or enhancing learning opportunities for students, and what is the impact for taxpayers in aggregate? And that can come from a lot of things. It could come from building consolidation, it could come from TIF revenues, it could come from a host of things, cost avoidance on building maintenance issues. However, there's not going to be 100% accuracy, but I would say, I'm sure the committee will get to this point where you just need to look at the material impact and kind of go with that 80-20 rule.
Right.
One of the questions I had when the committee did their own self-assessment of the 18 options, there was a criteria in on the economic factors, but there were no economic factors in that 18. So I'm sure people were looking at, based on what we think might
It would
happen.
be the most expensive, least expensive.
Exactly. So even the first cut at them by people who really know what's going on didn't have much data at all. But I do think when it goes to the community, there's going to have to be some level of detail.
So that's the current plan. That's where we are. Again, the developer has, the committee did give the developer some time to speak, present actually, the last meeting. I don't know, I think you guys, were you there for that, Elizabeth? Yeah.
Yeah.
So that was very planned to allow that to happen. And again, I think that provided some additional information, particular to what kind of goes through the developer's mind and what they're thinking, whether it's anchor stores and, and how the money would flow from their perspective. So, anyway, it's alive and well. I'll leave it at that. And it's hard right now to keep up with a lot of the different demands that are going on, but I'm pleased with the process. And again, as I said at the administrative meeting, I asked everybody to give Holly and Patrick, a little round of applause, because they've been putting in, we start at 5 and it goes to 9 and we can't end at, it seems like we're 9:30, it's like, people are really tired, and it's been ongoing. Plus there's a lot of things going on behind the scenes. So again, Holly, again, thank you for your time.
Thank you. I think both Patrick and I are enjoying it. It really is a great group of people as we try to put our brains together and look at the many different scenarios that could be.
It is impressive.
I mean,
Thank you.
the struggle always is to figure out, those, and looking at the options. It's been brought up several times. 51 years ago, somebody in South Burlington had the idea to say, build a new high school. Probably at the time there was a board, administration said, you got to be crazy. You don't have the numbers. And again, in this case, there were more demographic numbers that supported it. But part of that is also maybe some boldness that needs to happen to make sure that the opportunities are going to be, attractive and enhancing kind of the overall outcome for students. So anyway, enough said.
Any other questions on master planning or financial stewardship? All right, we'll move to agenda item 9, public school choice.
So we handed out we have some choice information for you. And this was a February 1st obligation. It just happens that, February 1st doesn't fall on a board meeting. Last time we were around the same time, actually a little bit later, I think.
Are you talking about this big picture sheet?
Yeah, so you have both. You have big picture capacity, and I think you have choice information too.
Both of these are dated February 2014, is that
Correct.
2015.
15, yeah.
supposed to be 15?
Yeah.
So
Today.
these are current?
Today, yeah.
It's a big picture, but let's see. Oh, here it is. Yeah.
Is it the choice letter of the January 22nd?
No. February 4th. This is last January.
Anybody need a copy?
Got it.
So as you know, this is never an easy conversation. Perhaps legislative activity will prevail in the near future, maybe, around public school choice. There is a bill in the House, I don't know, what's it, I'm not sure the exact number, but there is a bill in the House that was introduced out of St. Albans around public school choice, amendment to Act 129. But currently, we live under these rules, and these rules mean that resources don't follow students. We have an obligation to set both in-cap and out-cap limits. And what we're proposing tonight is that we set the numbers accordingly. So I think we've said, and again, John and Delina assisted with this, so I think, John, what we've said is that both 1 and 1, correct? On choice?
Public school choice, one additional
Yeah.
student.
So would that mean that there are 2 that are not paying tuition?
Yeah, one from last year.
And why would we want to increase the number when we already aren't getting paid for the first one?
To stay in the lottery, right?
Right, to meet the obligation of the choice.
So
we
once
have
we
one
fill a
minimum.
position, we're obliged to put at least 1 more in?
Well, that's part of the in-cap limit, that we have at least one able to be recognized within the lottery system.
This is without end?
Currently, unless there's legislative change.
So 10 years from now, we'll have 10 students that aren't paying tuition?
Well, one of them will age out, so after 4 years.
So it's a
somebody
max
will-
of 4, is that what you're saying?
Well, 4.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So
So your
what,
exposure, yeah,
So it's only
Trust me,
50,000, it's only
we know
50,000,
that-
it's only $50,000 worth.
we know that it's fundamentally flawed, Dan, and this was, again, conversations that we've had in the past.
so what happens, what happens if we choose not to do that? If we choose not to have a spot in the lottery? Just for conversation's sake.
I suppose we could, I could get a letter saying that I didn't adequately follow provisions of the law as outlined.
Oh, so it's not a choice?
Yeah, it's, again, I have, specific guidance to follow, the public school choice procedures, so.
But is your interpretation of that we have to open up at least one slot every year?
Yes, to be part of the lottery.
Why do we want to be part of the lottery?
Because it says that you have to have at least, be able to exercise a lottery system. The system has
So-
to
Is
be,
that by
Is that-
statute?
it's outlined in the statutory requirements under public school choice, is outlined, so.
And is it on an annual basis?
Is this another one of these
We
unfunded
could-
mandates?
Yes.
Yes.
Listen, one of the things I'll be talking about on Friday when I go down will be public school choice, as I did last year and the year before, and some of the board members, signed on and assisted me with that particular conversation. We shared that with our legislators, at various legislative updates, so. Again, our exposure to this is, it is what it is, we're asking for one choice, student in.
Can we count our big picture people as our choice person? Because we've already talked about reasons for us to have a greater cap in big picture.
Right.
So,
Right now, we have two different, and I think it's, again, advantageous for us to have big picture in and of itself, so that we're not bound by that, so that there's some added flexibility for big picture, so that we ensure that, our kids are getting what they need. Right now, in big picture, we have,
5.
yeah, 5.
But
So,
that's not what
none
I'm
of-
saying. I'm just wondering if we can stay in the lottery, but have our lottery spot be a big picture spot.
It's a good question.
Because we're going to accept a certain number of kids to make that program, sustainable anyway.
Well, does the school choice one have to be a high school student?
Has to be high school,
yeah,
definitely.
a high school age, yeah.
Yeah.
So the school choice only applies to high schools?
Yes.
So would we do a lottery for that big picture spot? Is that what you're?
I'm just wondering because
Well, we've set a cap in the past for
it's-
big picture and
Right.
school choice.
Right, but I
We've been
think
both.
we're saying something a little bit different.
I'm
right?
saying
Yeah,
we decrease our liability if we make that a big picture person.
So Julie,
I'd have to look
my
at it.
only concern, and maybe you can get legal advice about this, that would mean that a lottery student wouldn't have an opportunity to go to the regular South Burlington program, which is really what school choice
I
is about.
understand,
It's not
yeah.
They'd get into
a
big
specific
picture with
program,
restrictions.
Like Essex saying, well, you can only go into our STEM program, you can't go
Okay.
into our regular program. So I don't really, I understand
Yeah.
because it's bad from beginning to end, but I don't really think that we can avoid the one student per year.
But I think the board is asking specific technical questions that I do think are worth investigating because we're kind of locked into perpetuity otherwise until there is legislative action. So regardless of whether the student goes to big picture or not, the technical question is, can we fulfill our legal obligation by opening up a lottery for a student that would be,
Either.
and, would be in the big picture program specifically? Because it's, I understand what you're saying, Stuart, but that doesn't really answer the question of.
Does
can
it
we
satisfy the
fulfill- does-
lottery
Yeah, does
system?
it satisfy the legal obligation?
We can find
Um,
out.
Because it does address a liability the district carries otherwise. So
We can ask the question.
well, I guess, I think one of the things we need to understand is this is on here for action.
Right.
And you said there was a February 1st deadline?
Bless you.
Again, I can ask that there's an extension, that's fine. I have not yet asked that. These typically don't all fall in on the same time, so
Okay.
there's some flexibility there, but I can certainly ask that, we'll be following the February 18th board meeting, they'll be placed in an action, and could you clarify for us whether or not having if we have a lottery slot open,
Mhm.
would it be able to count to either or? Big picture or regular school?
Setting the big picture aside for a moment, is there, other than this legal reason, is there a reason why we would want to participate in
Choice?
the school choice? I mean, I can't
Well,
see it.
there's many
because-
reasons around choice, but not.
Oh, there's a lot of
not
reasons around
resources
choice, but
followed.
somebody's gotta pay for it, and I don't like the idea that we're paying for it when we have no control over it, okay?
There's many great reasons for choice, and there's, and that is that students are able to make decisions and programs that benefit. Right now, we have a student who, is part of Big Picture and is, one of our, prize students is a violinist, and she would not have been able to do that at Burlington as a result of, continuing in a program. They didn't have that. So she's flourished, in the Big Picture program. So the choice option is a wonderful thing. However, resources, it can't be without resources, particularly when the sending district keeps the full ADM, right?
Yeah, they
Making
keep the
sense.
money and the head count, and the,
That's right. And so what we previously, as you know, and this is old news, we in the previous had agreements where they come to you, then there would be an amount of money that was
yes,
sent.
and there, then in that case, it made sense for them to keep the student count,
Mhm.
because that was their hook into getting the money.
Yeah.
And I think one of the concerns I have with, it almost sounds like what is being recommended is kind of a minimalist approach, which is we can't do anything less than an FTE student to comply legally. So that's what we're saying. And, that may represent choice for whoever that student is, and it may be a great thing for both the student and the district, but it also diminishes the queue of a dozen students who might want to choose South Burlington.
It's very
that
unfair, sure.
I feel like the
Either
sense I'm
some or
getting
none.
from the board and the sense I think we've come to based on our, you've been very active, David, as has administration and others on this board and previously in highlighting the issue to the legislature. I think this may be another way to get an understanding as to what the impact of the legislation that was passed means for real students and real families who would otherwise make a choice to come to South Burlington.
So at this point, will we then have, with this provision, will we then have two such students?
One for Big Picture and one for choice.
No. I haven't talked about big picture yet. To me, that's another topic altogether.
Yeah, if we would have more than two, because how long have we been making it more than 1 year? So.
Yeah, so your trend, we grandfathered people that
I
were
think
currently
Stuart said
paying.
it could be as many as 4, but I don't know if we've done it for 4
That's
years
not
yet.
counting there was the grandfathering of people when the legislation changed, but at this rate.
But those people, there was still a financial agreement for.
But there's been at least 2 years where we've had a cap of 1. Isn't that right, David?
I'm not positive of that, but
Yeah,
you're probably right. I can't recall.
I don't think.
Well, I think we should just recognize that this is equivalent to giving $15,000 away a year, okay? Round numbers,
Agree?
okay? And if you add that up over 4 years, that's, I said 50,000 earlier, it's probably closer to 60. So, we've made decisions to adjust things that are smaller than that because we thought they were important.
Right.
Sounds like Dan should come with me on Friday.
I agree. I think we should. I
So
really.
if there was a
think we
way to
should think
vote
about
no
that.
against this one, I would vote no.
Yeah, I would.
In fact, my inclination now is to not vote at all on it and let the rest of you decide whether you want to.
Well, I think.
Well, that's part of the opportunity of the board. Let me get legal, clarity around what we can and can't
Yeah.
do. It may be that what I recommend, the board says no to, and that may be,
Well,
put me in the, again, I gotta think that through, but what we then send to the agency is affirming of our belief around resources should be following students. But again, I don't wanna put us into trouble.
if that were the case, I wouldn't have any difficulty with it at all. But
Find out what the obligation is and whether or
Well,
not.
it sounds like the follow-up is you believe there's a mechanism that we can delay taking action today without violating anything, any agency of education issues, and get the legal counsel on what the guardrails are around the lottery, and then come back at the 18th meeting?
Yep.
Okay.
Yeah, I don't want to make it sound like it can be just put off and put off, because part of this is that you have to announce and allow people to, enter into the lottery, make decisions, and students, those 12, and, or however many would apply, so.
So I think the message to the board is there will be some action required at the
Yeah.
18th based on additional input.
Yeah.
The big picture doesn't require an action, but we've done this in June the last few years, and I figured if I had it all out, why not give an update and see where we are according to the guidelines of 24 paying and 6, and so that's where it sits. We just lost a student for the second semester.
Resident student, tuition student?
Resident student.
We lost the person from the high school or from the big picture program?
High school, big picture. Both. I mean, it's high school.
Person's no longer in the district?
Right. No, in the district, in the, the program vocation, can you help me with that, Stuart?
Just an alternative program?
Yes,
Through the
yes.
district?
They,
Okay.
they will get a degree from SBHS if they do
Without
other
completion.
requirements. I'm
Yeah.
sorry, I can't remember the name.
But the point is, they're just not in the big picture.
Right.
The high school.
We've already received the ADM for that person this year.
So do you want to walk through big picture, David?
I don't know, I don't know that it's necessary, we probably can bring it back to
Okay.
you, and just be efficient with our time with both Joyce
Is
and
that on the
Big Picture.
same time frame as?
Well, it doesn't have to be, as John said, we did it late last year, but again, I think to John's point, some of, these are all related to student choice decisions, so.
It's unique to South Burlington. I remember we discussed reporting that to the state as a lost opportunity in this area.
Yeah. And we
So,
believe,
Can I ask a question about this thing, or do you want to defer it?
it's fine, Dan, you can ask.
Okay, so you have this category, non-paying. If I'm reading it right, it says there were 5, that there are gonna be 5, and then there's a 2 after it that says that somebody's gonna graduate.
Right,
2.
right. So there's one
Are there
senior.
in fact 5 non-paying, non-residents?
Yes.
Do you remember when we did this? We
Yeah,
let,
I didn't vote.
And the minutes are right there.
they have to stay in the
This
big
time I'll
picture
vote no.
program though. Those non-paying,
Right,
non-residents have to stay within the big picture program and can't become regular high school students, right?
Well, I think it's one thing once we've made a commitment to a student, to allow that student to continue. I think it's another thing to consider continuing a program in which we don't get paid for the services that we provide.
I agree with you, but the leaders at Big Picture told us that we needed a maximum number in order to make the program work.
I'm more concerned about the minimum number it takes to justify the staff that's there. And as long as and I think we ought to be able to satisfy that with the resident students or the tuition-paying students.
We did that, we did kind of the
And
break even.
that criteria was met last year. The reason I didn't vote last year was because there was an addition of a student who was going to be recognized as not paying. And my concern is that that's an additive thing, it just keeps growing,
Yeah.
like the other discussion here, except this one, I think we have freedom to act on. I don't think we're obligated to do this.
It's a quandary we're in, because again, a lot of kids, and again, we're in the business of kids, but we're also in the business of making sure we can continue to be within the appropriate, category of pay and taxation. So, I mean, this is a mess because resources don't follow.
Well, it's another case where we don't even get that, to count the student in our spending per student. We don't even get that opportunity.
We do have, there are some beginnings, I will tell you this, and Patrick, informed me of this, actually, and John, that and I won't say what district, but there is some interest by other districts to say, we'd like to enter into an interagency agreement to pay for a slot into Big Picture. And so, that will resurface, and
If you
to
wanted
date.
to, if you wanted to reserve a slot for a future paying student to come in,
Right.
that I could find a way to support.
So these things are likely to start happening, particularly with maybe, these agreements. And there's nothing saying that we couldn't bring back what we did when, with Burlington and CVU, et cetera. Currently, though, everybody's kind of in a wait period. And again, you know the story of that.
Yeah, I know also we could seek a waiver from the whole program under section L of the law.
Yeah.
Except we would have to show that participation in this whole school choice would adversely affect
Affect our
students in its high school. Now, I'm wondering if, is it possible to have some sort of waiver that we can put before the Secretary of Education, saying, we have 5 slots in the Big Picture, that's as far as we can go, but it's not clear that's covered in the whole lottery system. Can we get this limited waiver? Can we draw something up like that so that we can continue to have the Big Picture with the number of people we need and no longer have to have the one individual? It might be worth something.
Well, and I
to
think
look
from
into.
from the language you just used, Martin, the leadership within Big Picture has shared with the board that many of these students are at risk to not graduate without a program designed around in this particular way. And it's very consistent with the personal learning plans
Flexible
that are
pathways,
being
yeah.
developed. So that would seem to meet the criteria that you're talking about right out of the gate.
Well, I'm, yes, yeah, but I think the waiver doesn't mean that if we get 5 students from elsewhere that they have to pay necessarily. Yeah, that's part's not clear to me.
Well, I guess
think it's more of a
sort
waiver.
how,
It's a waiver from having to have the lottery and
Right.
having to even have one additional person because we are taking 5 free people, in our Big Picture program.
but it could be a waiver from Act 129 as well.
Yeah, I think the way, and again, I'll reread that particular portion. The waiver is specific to capacity. And, so of course, you can get into all kinds of dialogue around what capacity is, but particularly it's associated with demographics. And, if you've lost some students then in your high school, then you ought to be able to accommodate. Your staffing ratios haven't changed, waiver denied kind of thing. So
Yeah.
now, on the other side is,
It might be
if
risky
you've had an
seeking
uptick in enrollments and, your staffing levels are right up at the peak, then, yeah, we'll allow it to, we'll accept your waiver to have no compliance.
Well, and I guess I'm a little bit intrigued too with, there's a lot of pressure coming from the state on student-staff ratios. And unless I'm wrong, we can't count these students in our ratio, correct?
We count in head count. Let's see, how do we count these students in our, I believe we count them in our enrollment, but we do not count them obviously in our ADM. So they get lopped on in Big Picture, they're part of our count.
So our staff-to-student ratio is not adversely impacted by not being able to count these students.
Right.
All right.
When we accept a student into the lottery system, are we committed to their siblings over time?
No, it's a singular lottery situation. When we looked at accepting some in the past, we looked at our exposure. And we, provided, kind of those exposure limits to the board. Again, that's in part in play that, you're trying to be sensitive. I mean, to, the family education process and being connected to your school. But currently, no, there's no obligation if you accept this one that you gotta accept, I'll exaggerate, all 8 other children that might come along. But.
So the siblings that we accept were the ones that were grandfathered?
Mhm.
And- Okay.
Well, let me find out some more about it, and again, I want you to know, certainly I hear you, And that's helpful for me to take back and take down to Montpelier, and hopefully we'll see some changes in the future.
All right, we will move on to agenda item 10, superintendent's report.
So on here, we have adequate yearly progress, and I'll let Stuart talk to that in a moment. Budget communication plan, and you have that flyer at your place. And we want to, and again, we need to change, and we have changed the action required on the high school, middle school elevator, and particularly the high school. We need action on RFP tonight. So let me start out with adequate yearly progress. Stuart, if you would.
Sure. Basically, all we're talking about tonight is the fact that on the current legislation, No Child Left Behind, by the year 2014, all students, are supposed to be proficient everywhere, and even if you have one student who's not, then you no longer make adequate yearly progress. This is true in 8 states, Vermont being one of them that did not receive waivers from the Department of Education. All the other states are waivered states, and just for your information, if we were a waivered state, South Burlington would only be identified in one school for the special ed population. That would be it. And as a district for special ed, but in terms of the numbers, none of our other identifications would have ever happened. But that's not the case. And so as of this last year, all our schools have been identified. Our high school is in its second year because they actually made adequate yearly progress in 2013. And our other 3 schools, all the schools except Central School, are in their 3rd year of this process. And they all have continuous improvement plans and ways to keep student learning moving forward. That being said, because of the All Children Make It, Central School was identified. They had their first mark, and next year, if there is no change in legislation, and we don't believe there'll be any change in that part of the legislation, they will then become a school in need of improvement. And once they're a school in need of improvement, there's no more school choice. Right now, students from Orchard and Chamberlain, because they are Title I schools in need of improvement, their students have the option of attending a school in the district that wasn't in that category. So, we have informed, the letter that you have is we've informed all the parents who chose to go from Chamberlain or Orchard to Rick Marcotte Central School, that their children can continue, that's the law, but we no longer provide transportation, which is part of what we had to do as the law, and that the siblings of those children have no way into the school because we revert back to our regular zoning and districting. So we've sent a request to the parents if that means because of that they want to return to their home school, that they can do so, so that we can get accurate numbers for teaching. So that's really basically what's happening. And there have been a couple of parents, obviously, who have younger children who would like to continue. There's been, I understand, at least one, who said, well, wait, I need transportation. But those things are no longer our obligation under the law.
Didn't we tell them in the
From the
first
very
letter?
beginning.
Okay.
Yeah.
We sent with them every year, a fact sheet, frequently asked questions. Will my younger children be able to go?
No.
No. Will I get transportation after? No.
No.
Can my child continue?
Right.
Yes. So all those things, and we could have included that in here. In fact, we did send that to one of the parents who, because we know parents who chose not to, who might have, because they knew their younger sibling couldn't go, or they knew that once transportation wasn't provided, that it wasn't going to be something they can do. So, you can't have both ways for the people who chose. So anyway,
And
that's.
how many students, Stuart, took advantage of this?
I think over the time, I have the direct numbers. I don't know if Holly, knows offhand. I think it's about 45 children still in the system. Some of them may be moving to the 6th grade next year. The biggest group, so the first year was very late that we got the notification, and so it's a small group. It was a larger group in year 2 because they had plenty of notification. Mostly in the kindergarten was impacted. That's why there's a very large, you can see it moving up that were current 1st graders and next year 2nd graders. And then last year was fairly small. It was about 5 or 6 kids. So the big thrust was in And I think part of that also is people last year probably saying, oh, it is gonna end, we can tell you now that, you know, this is gonna be the last year of it, so I think less people chose, whereas 2 years ago, we didn't really know, you know, what the state would do.
We didn't do this, we didn't provide this to you last time, but we felt it was important, particularly given, as Stuart outlined, kind of the end. It never feels good in this situation, but, you know, we were not the ones that enacted AYP and the choice component. We're very happy with our 3 schools, and we wish that, you know, that integrity was kept. That said, we had people that exercised it. We were very clear. It's likely we may get some response. We've gotten a few. It never feels good when you're kind of saying, well, you're going to have to figure out transportation, and no, your sibling cannot come along, you know. So it doesn't, we're never, this is not a comfortable place, but we were really, really clear across the board with our communications. It's likely that what you'll hear is that, well, we didn't read that, we didn't read the fine print, et cetera. So we just want to make sure that you were aware of this and hope that we don't get a whole lot of questions, and we were really clear. So.
And out of curiosity, did we ever document our incremental transportation expenses?
John can
No.
tell you those.
We haven't articulated the exact cost. I mean, we've had a transfer bus, and I will tell you, and again, this is a little segue, but, you know, transportation, as you currently know, is, you know, we're kind of in a quandary at the moment. We have, you know, we're short drivers, we're going out with recruiting efforts, we've got some real concerns. The choice bus, the AYP bus, essentially, that has a transfer, has added a level of complexity that's been difficult for us. And Holly can certainly attest to that, because there's a transfer location that happens that is a timing issue of buses.
Is that at Dorset Park, the
No.
transfer issue?
No, it's, the transfer happens, I believe, at near Central School, I believe, is the transfer bus. Yeah. So, you know, so there definitely has been an incremental expense to this around.
Yeah, I know this probably isn't anybody's top priority, but it would be helpful to understand,
You know.
the impact,
Mhm.
because I bet that's more significant than we think. And to me, the more we do to document
Mhm.
the collateral consequences to a school budget associated with some of the federal or state legislation that impacts just operations, I think those anecdotal scenarios really help legislators understand,
Yeah.
or at least give some thought to
Right, transportation,
downstream
operations.
I mean,
consequences.
it's a very interesting piece, because clearly we needed another kindergarten teacher at Central, you know, 2 years ago, where we may not have needed those if those people's children had stayed at their regular schools, so that certainly is a cost. But I want you to know that the legislation was very clear that they didn't care about your costs. If you didn't have space, then build a temporary space,
Yep.
you know? I mean, it's right in the
Very troubling.
legislation that this is not our problem.
Yeah, I mean, if we had more that
It's an
had
unfunded
gone,
mandate, as Dan would say.
yeah, if we had more that had gone, we would have been in a different quandary.
We
So,
could have even kept a class here as long as Sue Luck was the principal.
yeah. We talked about a lot of those
They would have allowed us to have
options.
it here at a different location, just not under the
So you
same
could have
principal.
transferred the principals to the kids?
That's
Going back and
correct.
forth, right?
We thought, yeah. So, anyway, enough said. Want to just make you aware you have it, and, you know, we'll keep you posted as we continue down this road. Next is the communication plan. Document we have in front here is one of the big handouts is here. Getting this into the other paper, actually have a draft in front of you, the big page, and other correspondence along that timeline are happening, so.
Is there an opportunity for us to comment on this?
Yeah,
When does that have to happen?
I think it's probably right to do it now under the communication plan, so,
Well, I'm a little concerned that with only one section, and that's these highlights up here. And I really wonder whether highlights, A, should be that verbose, okay? And B, whether those are really the key items that we want to highlight.
Would you make them bullets or something?
I would make them like these improved efficiency things.
Right.
smaller, yeah. Well, we can, again, you kind of lose the reader, and, I mean, the way the format has been, it's been kind of a more visual, things.
So what input, I mean, this is amazing that this was put together so quickly.
Yeah, by the way, it's a good job.
Yeah, so John, Meg,
So,
Adele, all deserve credit on pulling this together, Delina, et cetera, so.
I mean, I think we kind of need to keep something like this. I wouldn't call it budget highlights, I'd call it budget introduction. Because it's kind of giving the background. I think some word about the strike is appropriate there. I think some word that this overall is our best effort to do what's needed to continue the program. And that we have a lot of facility stuff going on with the ADA. I think those are all important points. I don't know that we need to say the 3.27%. I mean, it's important, but we have it at
Down
least
below.
at least two other places below. I think 3 places, 2 or 3? No, 2 places down below. So I think that with those changes, but I think it's important to have that background, or you can call it budget background or introduction or something. It's just.
would you completely
Well,
get rid of bullet point 2, Martin? Or
Well-
would you keep like anything like the administration and board worked closely to?
Yeah, I guess
That's
I would.
actually,
yeah.
that's in David's letter too, so.
Yeah,
This-
no,
this
I
bullet-
would keep that, but
These
I
bullets
would.
are all from David's letter.
Okay.
We
Bullets came
weren't-
right out of the text.
Yeah.
Yeah, no, I think that that's fine too, but I would add and explain, what's missing in this whole thing is the, impact of the CLA change. And I think that that's important because 2/3 of our increase in the tax,
Yeah.
Three-quarters.
Somewhere-
3 cents, is from that CLA change. And that could go in that second
Bullet.
bullet in the budget introduction. If there's a succinct way to say that people would understand, which
So
those might not.
Just say it,
Those
right?
may
We
be-
could just say the number change represents the change in the CLA from this to this represented.
I think it needs to be as simple as factors beyond our control, because I think that's what people are.
I do like the idea of making it budget introduction or something like that.
Yeah.
Information.
Sort of a tone
introduction.
setter for the rest of the thing.
Right,
right?
right,
As opposed to, here's the things we really want you to understand from what's below.
right.
So introduction or information? Which?
Introduction.
Introduction.
Budget introduction's fine by me. And then I'm a little bit better off with the way this thing flows than,
And then the statement regarding the CLA should be incorporated into the second.
That bullet
point, I
too,
think.
maybe get rid of the 327 over last year budget since it repeats so much.
Yeah, I think you can do that.
I think you can do that for brevity, because it is, it's,
And then-
it's there a couple
And
other
then add the
times.
CLA to the second, to that end, or somewhere.
and is it mentioned, I didn't see it in there, is it mentioned in there that you?
Yeah, there's a question about it.
Is that in here someplace?
The CLA,
It's not on the front sheet.
No, in this.
No, it's no. It's not
it's in the
there.
book.
Should we
in the
put
book.
something in there that says,
Sure.
because they're not being mailed to people this year?
2 cents of the 2.61 cents is because of the CLA, and another, yeah, it's 77% of it's the CLA.
Right. And that should
And
be-
we can incorporate some of the explanation there in here, so.
And I guess the other thing that, that would be helpful in that bullet point there is, it's a 3.27% increase in the budget. Why is it only 1.62% increase in the residential tax rate? I mean, and especially when you factor in the CLA, that, I mean, it's only 1 penny more, despite that increase in the budget. I mean, and why is that? Is it because we have more equalized students?
Equalized
I
pupil.
mean, should
Well,
that
more
not be
students,
highlighted?
More students, more money from tuition, change
Yeah.
in the way the state parameters worked out.
That's right.
Should we,
I mean,
that
if they're
get
just-
too complicated,
If you're just
or-
three
I
three
think
words,
so.
comma, 3 words, comma, 3 words, comma, it works. If it's a sentence that, complete sentence, you can't do it. It's, then you have,
I think
know.
I think the equalized pupil thing is just
Hard.
something people don't get, and it's, the average reader of this does not understand what the difference between people sitting in chairs and equalized pupils are. Nor do they care.
Well, can you, I mean, is there an equivalent phrase that gets the point, like enrollment or
Yeah,
a
maybe.
pupil count?
Right.
Or something that kind of just
The way state calculates pupils,
well,
It would be, to me, the point is that we have tried very hard to keep our budget down. Some factors such as some of the facilities issues and some of the increasing costs. We have a 3.27% increase of the budget. However, it's only a 1.62% increase in the residential tax rate, and that's because we've maintained this number of pupils and whatever the other reasons are. And we note also that 77% of that 1.62%, or 2 cents of the 3 cents, is because of changing property values. I would say that instead of CLA, frankly.
yeah.
And not just changing, going up, property values going up.
Property values going up,
Yeah.
Increasing and rising.
which doesn't make sense to me. Why would we have a higher taxes if the property values are higher? Wouldn't it be higher rate if the
No, because
property
the
taxes
CLA
are
goes
lower?
down.
It's on
The
the
share of
higher
the state
amount.
grant list has gone up.
Yeah.
Right, it's all very confusing to me.
Yeah, those,
But when it gets down to a certain level, it will be
Then it has to be
readjusted.
readjusted.
One of the thoughts I had where it says collaboration on the fourth bullet, I think that's a separate bullet than the
Collaboration with the
sentence
city.
before it. Because one has to do with the effects of the strike and the
Yeah, I
settlement
think
and
you're
the
right.
student days. And the other one is our collaboration with the
you're right.
city.
Yeah.
So maybe just separating that out. I don't
And
know
I
how-
guess I'm not sure if that has anything to do with the budget. As
Ah, it
far
was
as
just more
introduction
about-
to the budget. I know it's like.
I think that's in your letter too, and I think that you
So
can
maybe
probably
strike
take
it
it out of
completely.
here.
Yeah, I would
Better,
strike that. It's not
That would be
closely
good not
related
to
to
add
the
another
budget.
bullet, so.
So is
Want
this
to
have
keep
to
master
be?
planning stuff in there, or you want to strike all that
I
too?
think
I'd strike the
strike that.
whole
Yeah.
master plan.
What
thing
about
out.
a sentence
And the
though?
collaboration, both those things,
Yeah.
because it doesn't have to do with the
But
budget.
what about somewhere about how we worked closely with the city, with our budgets and our I think that's
Oh,
important.
well, yeah, that, yeah.
You know, I think, because we do work closely with them around our
If we made it
budgeting, master planning.
specific to driving some efficiencies, I would speak to that in this bullet. If you add a bullet point that says collaboration is excellent and opportunities to improve efficiencies across.
Well, we've done some stuff with energy,
Right.
we've done, so.
Yeah.
And,
that's where-
and
this
I
is
would say this
related.
budget and the council reflect.
They're a coordinated effort, I think. It's important to highlight.
So when is this thing due? When do you have to get it to the? Oh, it's next Thursday, okay.
Yeah.
So we can see another draft of it then.
Yeah, so what we could do is, we can make some changes based on the feedback. We could push it back out, or we could have, if there's a couple of you that wanted to, because it's gonna have to go out next Thursday, which means you're not gonna have time to,
We can probably push it out to everybody.
Yeah.
That's fine. And
And
one
just
other,
say
real quick before I
yea or
forget,
nay.
that you've got the residential tax rate
Yeah, that was
down
wrong.
further.
yeah.
It shows it's going down a penny. I don't believe that that's the case. Do you see that? It's a tax rates per $100 value, residential tax rate with CLA. The last two columns, FY 2015 and FY 2016, something's wrong with those
Something's
figures.
wrong.
All right.
This number's bigger than this one, John. It's bigger than that. This one should be bigger than that one.
215, I put the number and it didn't get changed. 2015 was higher until the legislature changed the tax rate. So it's a good catch because I sent some figures along.
Increase over previous year, you mean, right?
15
Is that
should
what
be,
20's talking about?
won't be 8.27, it'll be 6.15%.
Oh, yeah, that
It'll be
number's wrong.
$1.61.
But also.
But the one
also
above
It
it,
changes, but changes
Yeah,
both.
both of them.
yeah,
Yeah.
right,
That's right.
okay.
These two.
And the estimated tax, or the actual tax increase is correct, that one got changed, $98.
Yeah.
Yeah,
So it is $1.63, is that what
that's,
the?
those are correct. It's
Okay.
just 15, all the changes weren't in there.
Okay.
And it's like 86 or something.
Okay.
John also worked hard to get the info on some of the surrounding districts, which isn't all easy, so we're still formulating, but.
Sometimes they don't want to tell me.
Yeah.
What do you want that for, right?
One of the districts in particular.
Yeah, I can probably predict which one that was.
So this will be
say
submitted
we'll tell
next
you.
Thursday for publication on
Is it this one?
February
No, I was in this one.
19th.
19.
Is that right?
Thursday.
So there's one other opportunity. What will be in tomorrow's paper would be the letter with my announcement that included really a lot about the budget. It actually serves as kind of an introduction. I think most of the board had a chance to see that. And that does not count as a board letter.
Oh, good.
So we've got one other opportunity, if we want to put something in next week's other paper. It would have to be in probably, we could work with Judy to get it in maybe by Friday or over the weekend. But the question is, there'll be sort of a preliminary, there'll be this the week before the vacation week. Do we want to put something else in that counts as the board letter, or we could do an ad or anything else in the other paper between those two dates?
Well, if it's an ad and we're using money, we can't promote.
We can't promote
Promote it, so I think we should have a letter,
the letter.
another letter. What the angle is, I'm not, maybe we repeat some of the same points that you made in your letter, and just maybe expand on them a little bit.
And I would keep it as succinct as possible,
Mhm.
because I think this has all the detail, this has, and you know, some people might go for this kind of information, and others might, you know, pay more attention to a letter.
Okay.
So it's just different ways to get out
So
information.
if
Would they
I
be in the same
draft,
issue?
if I draft a letter and get it out, I'm just worried about
Because otherwise-
timing.
because you
Could we
point to
maybe
something.
let Judy know we'd like to send a board letter in and for next week's, but we probably can't get it in till
Right, because this.
late Friday or Saturday.
Mhm.
But just let her know a letter's coming, then I can write it on the board's behalf, and it would really just highlight, I actually think maybe just
Right,
the
some of
discussion
the-
we just had
Yeah, pulling
about
out those 327, the
the
CLA
327,
effect.
but the tax rate only going up this much, and
Mhm.
the only other message I think that, and no, I think we can also cite, you will see this insert in next week's paper
Yes.
with more detail.
Yeah, I think that's a great idea.
The only other question I have relative to a letter is, we've talked a lot about some public sentiment about the budget that might be tied to either feelings about the strike or feelings about education financing reform in general, or just kind of being tax weary. Should we acknowledge that directly in maybe this second letter, first letter from the board?
I mean, I like the idea. I mean, I would think that just my idea of the letter would be we could start with a paragraph that explains that this budget is retaining our programs, and it's a great program, just a few highlights. And I'd throw in a couple of highlights of what we've accomplished over the last year. It can be graduation rate, college attendance rate, the academic and sports first place and whatever awards that we have, and just really hit that first, and then the second paragraph would talk about, I think, the strike, and how, you know, we understand and appreciate it was disruptive, but, you know, whatever our spiel is on that. And then maybe the third is to reiterate, as far as we understand there's a lot of pressure from the state level, but things are changing there, and we are working hard to try to get those dummies to, I mean, I could say that now, to do the right thing. I don't know, that just, that at least, I think that's isn't it our three main points that we're trying? Well, you could throw the other point in there, that we look better than all the surrounding districts, but I don't think we want to rub it in. But that's, you know, I mean,
Okay.
that's kind of my
Well,
2 cents
if you
to
want,
it.
I'll take a pass at the communication and try to get it out probably by Friday.
Then
You
you
know.
gotta figure out what your deadline really is.
Yeah, if we could
Find out.
confirm that would be great. Okay. And then this will go in, and that will be the extent of our other paper communication, other than what Corey would publish in terms of this exciting conversation here.
Yeah. So we have PTO meetings coming up. I know those are planned. I know there's one or two next week. So again, I'm going to those. A lot of the same
I was gonna
information.
join you at Orchard.
Yeah.
on Monday.
And so we've done staff meetings. John and Stuart and Joanne Godak have all assisted, where I've had duplicate staff meetings. So we've gotten out the word to all 5 schools.
Can we come up with any ideas how we're gonna get to the non-school population?
Yeah, well, again, part of that is through, communications through
The other
PTOs. We usually go to, I'm gonna get all these wrong, Pillsbury Manor,
The Pines.
Pines,
Do you have
off of
anything
Allen
set up
Road.
with them, or do you have
No.
somebody?
I don't have anything set up. Usually it's just through their contact to just go and, drop information off and hang around and try to pull, anybody has questions about it, but a presence there. So that's to the extent. Usually we do senior, at the City Hall, senior lunch. I know it's not exactly that. It's not called that, but usually go and ask to, they're always a great audience to just listen for a minute.
Yeah, I would also consider dropping some of these off at the Meridian complex on
Mhm.
Lime Kiln. There's lobbies in each of those that we might be able to do that. It would be helpful, I know I have access as a board rep to the Front Porch Forums, so we could also write a little blurb for that. I'm not sure I have time to do that. Is there anybody that could step up and,
Well, we could probably use whatever letter and just condense that.
it just has to be really short. They
right,
have a
right.
criteria.
I'm happy to take whatever we get together for the other paper letter and condense it for
Okay.
Front Porch Forum.
And we can actually send that either out through Deline or through my account there. Okay.
I have one other suggestion as well, that perhaps we should, between the 5 of us, well, no, Diane's not going, we'll get Patrick to do it. Man the polls on town meeting day.
I was planning
Yeah.
to, like, at the end, I know in the past, we kind of all checked in with Donna at the locations to
Yes.
see what the numbers were, and I
I
was
don't
gonna.
think we're allowed to we're not allowed to stand out there and promote the budget.
Why not?
She won't let
Well, you
us do
can
that.
say vote. You
Right.
can't, can I just? I need
Right.
to
We
answer
can't,
this.
like,
Well,
be there
okay,
to.
well, here's what we could perhaps do. We can, I don't see why we can't.
We've had
if
this
it's-
conversation with her before, I'm pretty sure, haven't we?
Yeah, you can't
You
go in
can't
there
go in
and
there.
interfere and.
No.
Well, not
Sure,
in, no,
outside.
just like all the candidates are outside,
Right.
is what I'm talking about.
I don't think you can do that either.
Oh, you just don't want to.
No, I mean, we can do it, but I don't think, no, I really don't think you
All right,
can.
well, we could have is signs that say, vote, school budget, ask me about it, or whatever, ask questions, to make it clear that we're there to answer questions. And obviously, when we're talking to people, we say, vote yes, and here's why you should do it. And I see no reason why we can't
Yeah,
do
I think
that.
that's an okay idea. We ought to get it cleared through Donna to make sure that it.
Yeah.
Well, sure, I mean, yeah, we could just
can't-
clear,
I don't think we should just show up and do it. We ought to make sure.
Right.
do you want me, I
We get
will
more
clear.
publicity the wrong way.
Do you want me to, I will talk to Donna to
Of
find
course,
out
any
how far we can
publicity
go
is
with
better
this.
than none.
Great.
If we can actually say vote for the budget instead of vote school budget.
I have the sense we can't do it. Okay, yeah.
Well, no,
I
yeah,
think-
well, maybe
yeah,
we can't, maybe we
maybe
can't. I'll ask, yeah.
Yeah,
I'll ask
I'm
her.
happy to do it
I'll
if we
put-
can.
I'll put it
Well,
on my
you
to-do
can-
list.
Not
I
all
mean, if I'm
day.
thinking about what candidates can do, you can put signage up a certain distance away from the polls. So it may be the difference of where you stand
Yeah.
at the
Well,
end
yeah,
of the
and
day.
I know you can have vote for the budget. I mean, they were all
Yeah.
over Burlington last year. You can have those kind of signs. It's just a matter of how close you can.
Right. And people
Be to the
hold their
poll.
own signs too. Candidates hold their
Right,
own
right.
signs.
Well, there may be a question of whether they're board-sponsored efforts or whether they're.
Right.
Well, they're not
Right.
board sponsored. They can't
They're
be board
done-
sponsored
that's the
efforts.
thing. If it's
Right.
like a parent group, which we've had in the past.
Well, I'm a community member who has 2 kids in school. That's why
Yeah.
I'm gonna.
Conflict.
You used to be an ordinary citizen, you're not anymore.
There's no conflict there.
All right,
I'll talk to
so
Donna.
you'll clarify that with Donna, and we'll see if we can't do something. And obviously, I will plan to be out at
Yes.
some locations, but I can't be at all 5, or 3,
Three.
so 3.
I also think we should, like we did last year, everyone be at at closing, like around 7, to collect the numbers so that we can, through somebody, through David, just kind of tally everything so
Yeah.
we know quickly.
Okay.
Okay.
I hope for your sake it's a little warmer this year than it was
Yeah,
last
I
year.
do too. I
Not
had to,
looking good.
I had to beg some of those hand hot warm things
take
off
some
of
of those
somebody,
things.
yeah.
Maida was nice enough to
Take
hand them out over.
take a hint there, dress warm.
All right.
Okay.
Onto the elevator.
I think that we might have worn David out on that. Why don't we go ahead and shift, John? I assume you have a lot of information on the high school elevator RFP.
I do.
Shall we
There-
move into that?
There are
Can I
two,
just interrupt with one thing? I'd like to commend the business people for their efforts in putting this together. It was a great effort, and I appreciate it. So, thank you.
Yeah, thanks to all. That was
think of what
really good.
Andy Pearson, who's jack of all trades around here, he coordinates copying these things, because we used to send them to a publisher. So we're kind of tallying how much money we've saved through the postcards and all that kind of stuff. So it's amazing how fast they,
Good.
yeah. So
Have you
anyway.
gotten a lot of requests since that little card came home yesterday?
We gave the city 75, and there was a request for 50 more, so I'm not directly involved, but I know that I
Yeah.
was getting your books today, and Krista scolded me for
Oh.
trying to get them out of the wrong box. So, so I know they're a hot item over there.
Yeah.
Sorry about that.
no
Phone
problem.
just keeps ringing and ringing, so you know something's going on.
How we resolved everything?
I was hoping, but
So we're in good shape. We got a few follow-up items,
Yeah,
and
thank
we've
you.
assigned those, and we just invited John to actually speak on the elevator RFP.
great, thank you, sorry.
No problem.
I really endeavored to get you all the information I could on Friday. There are moving parts, and we want to be right with our attorney and also the architect. So with that said, there are two things here. One deals with the authority to repurpose the 2005 bond proceeds, what that entailed, and specifically, could we use more than $600,000 of those bond proceeds for the elevator ADA ramp and change the amount that we're expending on restrooms. That specifically was what Robert Fletcher was addressing here. Bob is a certified bond attorney, so we used him for the election, and we've used him for a couple of things now that deal with debt. His comment, the first paragraph kind of says that he sees no issues arising from using higher than originally intended portion of the 2000 bond proceeds for the high school elevator project. The ballot approved by the voters references only capital improvements and additions to the 3 schools. It didn't include any reference to specific projects or specific dollar amounts. And then he gave an example that there was no constraint using one for the other. Now, that said, we are going to upgrade some restrooms, and we included more money in the 2016 budget for the elevator ADA project. So we're endeavoring to keep in with the spirit of what we told the voters, and we will. It's just a matter of how much funding is available, and the scope of that elevator ADA ramp is the issue.
So I think this came up at our last meeting, but there will be progress made on all those items that were articulated to the public when we talked about redeployment of the bond, just not 100%.
That's right.
So there is the possibility we'll be going back at some point in time, asking for more funding, and the response to the question is, you asked us for this 3 years ago, or whatever it is.
Right.
Is really that we completed 2 out of the 4 bathrooms, and now we need to do the other 2, and we did X amount of work on windows, or.
Right.
So it will represent less than 100% completion, which the bond didn't necessarily specify either.
Right. For instance, on the windows, we knew as of even last August that because of the substances that were there, that we wouldn't have enough to do the whole wing we wanted to. So in the plan that we put together, we put a second phase of windows in there. We haven't done that yet with restrooms because we're not to that point, but we will. So we'll keep notes on all that.
And part of your questions are right. I mean, to the public, they passed that, they repurposed that bond, and they said, hey, it was supposed to take care of everything. But again, I think even in the budget articulation and communication, we've been clear about, our adherence to some of the facility-related needs. We probably, for instance, the bathrooms and things of that nature, we probably will need to continue to be really clear around, where we are with those projects. But again, our concern was, and that's again why we went back to Bob Fletcher, is that we wanted to make sure we were within appropriate purview to continue to move forward the way we were.
So that's the first part, and I understand completely of keeping track of the projects and that kind of thing. The second is the way the project will be managed would be through a construction manager contractor. And what I sent you Friday was an excerpt of the state law and an RFP that had qualifications that we would use to select this contractor. And this, because the project is more than $500,000, needs a lot more board scrutiny than one, for instance, the windows. We come to you with bids and we've done the screening. You're more part of the process in this. So what this RFP is then is to, first of all, this is request for pre-qualifications. So we're going to ask qualified contractors who would be construction managers and manage the whole project for their credentials up front. We've used the pattern that was used at Chittenden South for a lot of, they've had some big construction projects in the last few years. We used that as a basis, Doran Whittier, and then there were 3 or 4 back and forths with the attorney this week to make sure we're lined up with state law. So they constructed this this RFP, and we've discussed it, and that's what you have here. I'm sorry just getting it today, but I wanted to make sure you had those qualifications down.
Part of this is the timeline of these. So obviously the scoping of the work, the amount of work that needs to get done, and the time frame to do it. And so we're definitely, you say, hey, we're February, but we're backed up based on the kind of backwards planning of the summer work is really why it's so critical to us. We were not necessarily totally aware of, all of the constraints. And so the reason this is here to you tonight is that in order to move on some of these things, to make that summertime compliance, we've got to move on them.
Just so that I'm clear on something, if I remember back earlier on, there were 3 options of the way this is going to be managed. We could self-manage it, we could hire a manager, or we could hire a contractor who would manage it.
Mm-hmm.
And what you're saying is you've settled on the third approach.
Right. I'll give you some more reasons why.
Yeah, why not the other 2?
The other 2 is our
manage it ourselves. One
It
option.
said we
right?
couldn't have an employee manage it though. The stuff that you sent us.
Right, there's a clerk of the works
Oh.
discussion we're not gonna have tonight. That's another layer to this, and I'm not ready to talk about that yet, because that's one we might try to do ourselves. But the difference between a construction manager / contractor and going to bid just for a contractor is that the moment the construction manager is hired on board, they work directly with the architects to review the plans and make suggestions from a contractor standpoint of, hey, that doesn't look practical, or we can do this cheaper. They're involved, it's a 60-day process, so starting in mid-April, they're involved with the designer, whereas if it's the contractor only working with the architect, the plans are all set. And if there's any changes to be made, they're formal change orders, and they're additional costs to the district. So this, from my understanding, this bid may be a little bit higher up front, but it's a guaranteed price for this whole project. And the contractor either makes a profit or loses on it. But our price is guaranteed. There aren't change orders.
So can I ask you a question related to that? So does that put us out of compliance with 2.5 because David can't enter into an agreement that lasts more than a year?
Well, no, the board's gonna.
Yeah, so the board would be the authority on this.
Yeah,
Okay,
yeah.
Because you're right, I couldn't, and that's
Right.
why it would be here. And so,
Yeah, you definitely be the board.
okay,
It's a good question.
yeah.
One of our key point is on page 6, I believe, on page 5, and down below there's page 5 of 7. There's a schedule there. And in order to have a construction manager on board by April 8th, we need to start the process soon. We have tomorrow for advertising, but qualification statements would be coming back by the end of this month, February 26th. One other thing that's involved, if you look at the April 6th date, owner opens bid proposals. Even after we got this afternoon, I double checked with Bob, and that has to be either at a special board meeting or we change and open those bid proposals on April 8th at the regular board meeting. The board has to witness that. It's a public, it's more public than
Normal. Yeah.
I mean, it's always
been open.
advertised. Our office does it, and you get the report, but it's a board process.
It has to be a board majority.
Yes, yes.
At a publicly warned meeting. I think.
And you would open the bids then. You don't have to
Rule on
decide
anything.
right then, but it's rather than my office with David and opening the bids before that.
So you mentioned John Doran Whittier. What's the role of Doran Whittier in terms of providing, well, in the context that you had brought them up here?
They're the architects, so they're doing all the planning. And what they've done so far is they're just about on 75% of the drawings are done for the whole thing, the elevator and the ramp and all that kind of thing. So we rely on them heavily for the as we did at the middle school.
So did the recommendation for a pre-qualification program come from them?
They brought it up first, and then we talked with
Options on how to manage
right.
the scope of this project.
Yes,
Yeah.
they were very concerned. They're very concerned about the timing of, you have 2 months in the summer to do part of the projects, 2 months the next summer. They're very concerned if we didn't do it this way, we'd have trouble getting it done.
Is there, this may be a really dumb question, but given the pace at which some pretty significant decisions need to be made, would we be better off shifting this by a year?
The whole thing?
Do the same 2 phases, but just start phase 1 next summer?
My only concern is the accessibility that we need it's a, I guess, imminent need, an immediate need that's more critical this in FY16 at the high school than it has been this year, just because of the mix of kids. So that's my concern with getting access for some kids that won't have anything but the elevator right now, or the backup. That's the time constraint.
I mean, I don't know what other, by delaying a year, whether the bond, we probably would have to revisit that too a little bit around. the funding
well,
structure on that
The only thing is, I have to,
report.
if it's not spent within,
Right.
another in a second 5-year period,
You gotta,
we have to go through and certify that we're not earning
More
arbitrage
interest
on the
into
money.
it.
It's an IRS requirement, so
Right.
that's kind of minor, we're not, so, but,
So from an access standpoint, are these students that are coming into our system or in our facility now?
they're in
Coming.
the middle school now.
coming
So
to the high
they
school.
would-
So
Coming to
that's
the
the
high school.
imminent need you're talking
Yes.
about.
That was the critical point, getting from level 1 to level 2 without without an elevator. That elevator, we've talked about this. It's very old and got us going on it in the first place. It's too small, that kind of thing.
So what do we need to do this evening?
Well, the only thing that needs to be done is to say, yes, it's okay to release this RFP for pre-qualifications, and then we'd advertise that.
And at that point, that doesn't necessarily commit us to select a
No, because that will be done.
project manager. Okay.
Right.
So that's a no-risk part of the process right now.
Right. No risk, boy, I said right too fast.
We don't want to just loosely go out with a request for proposals, I don't think.
No, I meant more in the context of, are we committing
Committing money, though.
ourselves
No,
through the
down the road
process?
commitment,
Yeah.
right.
right.
So that, I mean, to me, it sounds like it's a required part of the process,
It definitely is.
and, but it doesn't limit a further discussion of, are we trying to do too much too soon?
Right.
And are there other ways to accommodate the students on an interim basis?
Although and you haven't heard it, but we've met many times with high school administrators and special education staff to try to figure out the best way of doing it and providing options when the elevator is broken down, and they're pretty small.
And it's not
Pretty
the
small.
same as the middle school. Again, the middle school administration worked hard when we had our middle school elevator situation go down, where we were able to move programs down. It's a whole different ballgame at the high school. There's more specialized classrooms. There's capacity issues, so
Yeah,
you enter
and
into that moving thing.
I mean,
it's
I
problematic.
understand what you're saying. I'm also aware that even under the best of circumstances, projects have delays and glitches in them. So
Yes.
we may be faced with access
Yeah.
issues regardless. And I'm
Trying to look at the
certain that
best.
all of the students that have needs moving to the high school probably have had some needs prior to getting into 8th grade as
Mm-hmm.
well. So there's a balance there of just good planning, good stewardship, and making sure we are providing access to the kids that need it.
Yeah, we were initially trying to compress this to get it all done in 1 year, in the summertime with an earlier release, and so we've gone from the kind of 1 phase to the 2 phase. And,
No, I think, and we could have Dorn Whittier come to the next meeting a little bit and talk a little bit more about it if that's helpful, or take questions between now and then and just to increase everyone's confidence in the project. I mean, I know the consequence if we get started and it's not ready August 15th. We've displaced every kid, so I get that.
Right.
So, John, right now, a student could not access every floor, right, at the high school?
Without the elevator.
Right.
What the elevator does, it very limited access to the mezzanine of the gym, because it's not set up that way right now. But that could be, a little investment that could be made. But there's no backup access without that.
So it's possible that if that elevator went down, a student wouldn't be able to access the cafeteria, their English class, the gym, lots of, I mean, there is no backup right now.
Right, the backup for the cafeteria to go outside and that kind of thing, so, yeah.
So if I read the schedule, do I read it correctly that April 8th is the proposed
Board.
Fisher Cut Bait date?
It would be. We might change that a little bit because that April 8th is the day the bids would be open at the board meeting, so
So it could be moved to the 9th or the 10th?
or the following Wednesday, I mean, there's a little bit of play
Probably
there,
so.
but
There's a little bit of play in there.
just
Okay.
not much.
And then secondly, while I have the floor here, if I understand it right, this RFP has been constructed jointly between you, Dor Whittier, and the legal people?
Yes. And we got the format from a project that Dor Whittier had done down at CVU. So it's worked before.
I think, again, are you looking for action? Because I'm kind of looking at the point here that the pre-qualification criteria, which are established by the district and are to be approved by the board, we're just seeing this tonight. So are you asking for action from the board or really informing the board that the RFP for pre-qualification will go out tomorrow?
Well, on Friday, I gave you the best I could for the pre-qualification. I didn't have it finalized. If there's no action tonight, I'm not gonna send this out because it has the qualifications for the contractor
To
on
submit.
it, so I'd delay it till next meeting.
How much did it change from what you sent out Friday to what we have here?
There's
Can you
only-
point out the changes, because I mean, I reviewed that and thought it was fine.
If you look at,
But,
page 2, they're basically the only change in here, other than a comma or something, is .1. We shored up the prospective bidder must demonstrate that it maintains a clear and stable organization structure. That was in,
that was there before, right?
but now the next sentence, interested firms will submit an organization chart and a narrative description of any changes in the organizational structure for persons occupying those positions over the past 5 years.
Okay.
We want to make sure they're stable, so that was something to shore it up a little bit.
Is that the only change?
I'm 90% sure.
Well, I mean, besides commas, although
Yeah,
commas
yes.
could be very important.
No,
Totally
there was a
different.
question of whether we would allow only 3 school projects, and if they had experience with elevator, that would take care of the other project. But we kept 5 construction projects in here, so that was a clarification, maybe not a change.
Well, can I make a motion then to approve what is it that you need a motion for?
Approve the qualifications for the construction management service pre-qualification statement.
That's what I said, Meg. I
Yes.
move for that.
I second that.
Is there any more discussion? I would probably just give the feedback that as this moves forward, I think the board, given the level of responsibility and obligation under 2.5, will need some further discussion and education about kind of the
Yeah.
timing and assurances about impact on students and facilities and so forth.
Yep.
Well, I do believe we need to put it as agenda item every time
Regular.
now, because there are, if there's a choice between this and master planning and visioning, this is pretty big too, so I just want to make sure it's on there.
Some kind of updates, yeah.
I mean,
Got
that's
it.
a request, I'm not saying you have to do anything, but it would help me, because
I think that
we're
makes
pulled in
sense.
many directions, and I don't like to give you things late.
No, I think the board appreciates this is a pretty complicated project, so we understand the interest in a project manager and understand the sensitivity of timelines as well. So we have a motion and a second on the table. Any other further discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
And the motion passes.
Thank you.
Thanks. All right,
Thank you.
we'll move on to policy monitoring report review.
So this was just a discussion that we marked here as a place to have a conversation around monitoring report review process. I think it was a request that came up last time, so it made it on the agenda.
I understand that you held it over because I wasn't here.
Yeah.
Yes.
So,
Someone tried to sneak it through.
so it's on here because, you know, the thought was, in the previous, I'll say, year, we've really worked hard to just bring everything in front of the board. Although there's been some, board meetings that have gone on and on and on to try to weed through that. And, you know, my suggestion here in the discussion phase would be that we go through the calendar and target those that are large monitoring reports. And maybe for those large monitoring reports, we have a subcommittee that would do kind of due diligence and review of kind of the common things, and let all the other ones go as we have. But we know particularly like 2.5, 2.10, you know, are larger ones, and that would probably be most advantageous from a time perspective to have a couple board members, you know, review it before. So that would be my kind of general guidance.
And we were going to have you test that out, Martin, by serving with me on a review of
Oh, right.
2.5.
Well, I guess I would put this pitch out there. I would say, first of all, that our policy monitoring should be one of our top priorities if we're policy governance.
We're modified policy governance.
Modified policy governance. I'd say the second thing is that I don't know that we went actually, and I'm gonna get hit for this, that we went necessarily even far enough this past year. Because I think if it's, number one, if it's one of the most important things we're supposed to be doing, and number two, we are trying to reach out to the community, if not people actually attending our meeting, but people who watch, and we do understand that a lot of people in fact watch this, that we should in fact be spending more time in walking through the monitoring reports. Maybe this isn't the year to do it, but I think we should be periodically, every other time we go through a report, is actually walk through and explain, which is something I think we actually rushed through, and I understand why, because we just wanted it to be done, but I think it would behoove us to actually go through and say, here's why we're doing this monitoring report, here's what this is about, and here's the provision, you know, the first provision we're looking at, and here's what this next provision is, and what, it doesn't necessarily have to be just reading it, but it can be summarizing it, or it could be reading it. Because I think that whatever time we're spending on it, if anybody's tuning in there, it's just, I mean, there's not context. There's not, so I would actually put the pitch that we schedule more time for these monitoring reports. Maybe, again, give it a break, because if we do it this year, surely Julie won't run for the board again next year. So maybe, oh, you're not up next year, okay, anyway. So but I really think that we're not paying enough attention to it, frankly. It seems to be kind of rushed through.
Well, I'm not wanting to, again, just for discussion, I wasn't wanting to indicate that you don't still spend the time. There may be just some you know, for individuals that may have a particular interest and you know, have gone through it before, could continue to work on 2.5 that would allow for the richer discussion as opposed to all kind of
Well, I
ongoing
think,
learning.
yeah, I mean, I think Martin's bringing up a good point, which is when you choose to govern through modified policy governance, you are, it is a big responsibility of the board to focus on policy. So the sense I get, but I think it's a different objective than you're talking about, and that's one of, if I think about where we're evolving to, and that's why we call it modified, because we've continued to change things a little bit. But it would be, I think from a calendar board review standpoint, I do think some policies lend themselves to the group review, real-time review, and some are better off with a little bit of pre-review and some guidance by a subcommittee. But to your point, I think what we might want to consider is in the policy review schedule, pick out maybe twice a year, we pick 2 policies and we go through more of an educational process for the public and have that discussion. So we don't have two objectives of reviewing the policy and the monitoring reports at the same time as we are explaining what the rationale behind the policy was and kind of walking through. And I think it's hard to separate those sometimes, but I think the pressure on our board time when we are reviewing it with input and feedback is different than we might be in
Informing.
more of an informing capacity. Does that make sense?
Yeah, no, I think that's a good compromise on those two goals. Although I do think that if we have a policy coming up, I do think we can somewhat combine. We can have the committee do the review and give feedback to the administration to hone it for the time it's coming before the whole board. But at that time, rather than seeing it twice, I mean, that time we can kind of do the review, but also the educational
I
parts.
think it's just a time commitment standpoint. I think to review it is one chunk of time. If you're choosing to inform on a certain policy, I think we have to carve out a bigger chunk of the agenda time
But I guess,
purposefully.
yeah, no, I agree that we would have a bigger chunk of time, but I think it would be still in the context that we're looking at this policy.
Yeah, I think we could do that.
Here's the review,
yeah.
and here's our feedback, the committee, the committee can take charge of going over that policy that time, and can explain, this is what we looked at, this is the feedback we gave,
Yeah.
and this was the purpose of this
Yeah.
exercise, so.
Yeah, my only concern is that based on the time commitment it's taking to do the actual monitoring in a meeting, if we add informational requirements to that and do it adequately, I just think we'll get policy review weary if we do it with every time it's on the calendar.
Right, no, I'm saying, I like the idea of just picking a couple of.
And
per
maybe we
year
just
to get
rotate through, maybe
rotate.
every 4 years, we've gotten through all of them on an informational basis only.
And we, part of our ongoing policy governance education is we, connect back in with, what are other people doing as a benchmark. And I would say, on many of our policies, which I think is a testament to the good work, our evidence and is far exceeds what we're seeing with others. And so, I mean, I feel good about that. We're kind of beyond the place where we're able to get other, I mean, I think we can go farther away maybe to get better help around policy governance and questions, but currently, at least the way the monitoring reports and the questions that have been asked by you have been good.
And I think the one other thing I would add for that one or two other two policies per year is that when the committee is looking at it and looking at the evidence and such, there should be a close scrutiny of where we are with the policy language and the interpretation, just to check, as a check-in.
Right, yeah.
Because we may have found through practice over a couple years or a few years that the interpretation doesn't
Doesn't
really
work,
work or whatever. So, any event, but
I think too, it might be helpful on the agenda to identify the policies that if you're doing that more extensive, intensive review, so that people who are watching or people that, might come to a board meeting know when that's happening.
I think we can identify that on the calendar as
That's-
well.
Yeah, but I mean on the
Oh,
agenda.
each agenda, yes.
So
yeah.
that when people look at the agenda, they can tune in.
well, which policies do we have coming up for review?
2.5. And we do have a subcommittee of Julie and myself who are reviewing that on Friday with John.
So maybe we shouldn't do that one, since we have lots of other things going on now.
Yeah, we'd probably not do
Push it
that
off,
one first.
yeah. What's the next ones after that? Do you have a calendar as far as?
I do not have my calendar in my book,
All
sorry.
right, so we'll figure it out maybe next time.
2.10
One.
is coming up at your next meeting, and never really been happy with that policy.
sense you
2.8.
monitoring.
On the
2.8 and
18th?
2.10.
On the 18th or the? no.
It's coming
18th.
up on the 18th.
You'll see it on our
So,
agenda, yeah.
a draft will go to you anyway, next week, but,
Oh, yeah.
I wouldn't mind having some people, join me sometime between now and the 18th to really look and say, because again, I have to tell you, there's not equivalent policy with other policy governance. They have their ends monitoring, but not a curriculum-specific piece that you added.
Not
So
yet,
there's
anyway.
not a model out there, and a lot of what we've done in the past, like I said, hasn't been what you were looking for. So I want to make sure that we're doing what the evidence is that you are interested in.
Those are our two bigger ones. I don't know, Elizabeth, if that's, you're doing 2-5, you and Julie on Friday.
Right. Why don't we wait till we get to the agenda review, and
Mhm.
then we can decide how we want to go forward on that one?
Yep.
Okay. All right, any other comments on policy monitoring report review? All right, so we will move to the agenda. Good timing.
So we need to add the calendar on here.
Will that be an action item at that time?
No, we'll just, not positive whether it's,
For discussion.
we'll
Are you
just,
talking about the school calendar?
school calendar. And then choice, we need to put on here. Which carry over.
So,
Sorry. So tell me, David, what the discussion is gonna be about relative to the calendar, since we had that discussion tonight. We're just
Well,
gonna
it
have
may
it.
be action.
Okay.
We have to put on, and I think it's important for transparency of the board, know the late start days
Mm-hmm.
and any of the
Oh.
half days for elementary. I think
Okay.
you should have that.
So they're slotted now, right now, but
Right.
we may move some. For example, in the calendar you see today, there's an in-service day on the 9th of October, and traditionally we've had a half-day also in October, which we may want to move somewhere else because we don't want to have a whole day and a half, for example.
So I think it's right to have the conversation here and let the public know that you're working on the calendar, and then we publish it and give people the opportunity. There may be others, and some of you had some email from this last go-round, you may get others.
Yeah, I think there were some people that weren't able to find our meeting tonight. That's the message I got, so.
Oh.
I don't know if we didn't put our.
Room
maybe
10.
We're in a different spot,
Yeah.
but anyway.
So that's also a good reason to have it on there again,
Okay.
it sounds like, if they were.
excluded.
Yeah.
Okay.
So I have a question, actually it goes back to the policy monitoring report review and setting the agenda, kind of a bridge issue here. And it goes back to the fact that we're gonna hear about elevators every 2 weeks. And that is missing the hearing about how we're progressing with ends monitoring. And I think we have to hear about that on a monthly basis. I really do. It feels, we've been doing a lot of important things today, but, and often do, but we seem to push the ends monitoring off too much. Even if it's just kind of an update of where we are, I think that's important. I throw that out for the rest of your consideration, whether we should have that
As a routine agenda item?
as a routine agenda, not necessarily every time, but
like,
once a month until we feel I know we're adding, we have an awful lot of routine agenda items. Maybe we don't want to do that because of it, but.
Other board feedback on that?
Well, I think it'd be really nice to get some indication of what's happening on the ends monitoring things, and whether we are making any progress. I would really like us to see some of those specific monitors get put in place, even if, because I think it's gonna be an ever ongoing process to get them all in place, if it ever happens.
So that's a
So-
perfect kind of segue. I mean, we're not talking about the 18th, but we have a desire to share with the board kind of around ends transition or whatever. I don't know if that's really the right word here,
Well, it's
but
a question of the transferable skills. The state of Vermont has now come up with their ends policy. That's what the transferable skills are, and I really want to have a discussion with the board about having to have two sets of standards, our ends and their ends, and whether that really is doable.
So the conversation, and again, what I'm proposing, and again, Stuart knows this, is that we have some concerted time around this ends monitoring, or the transition, the conversation, and high school, middle school administration are here to sit with you, spend some considerable amount of time to talk and walk us through the process around where we are with our ends, what are the transferable skills, kind of in parallel, where are their alignment and matches, where are their, and to be able to walk through that, because the transferable skills and the assessment measures are going to come out. And so I think we create confusion when we do this kind of conversion, or will be doing this conversion. And I think it's worthy of a conversation with you.
So would this be
to have
the
that.
nature of recommending changes to do that?
I think it's a worthy, then we should be planning on having this every time. Because we put the ends policy in place 4 years ago, and if we're gonna be hearing of yet additional having to modify the ends, I mean, it seems like we're never getting closer to what our fundamental role is supposed to be, which is setting the policy for our ends and seeing that we're meeting it. It's getting
progressive.
to the point of frustration.
Well, and
It's been
I
that
mean,
point.
it brings up a different point, which is, if it is our role and we have executed our responsibilities in identifying the ends, and we're constantly finding ourselves usurped by other authorities in terms of executing those, I mean, that, you can argue we were ahead of the curve or we're really behind the curve on that. And I do feel like we have spent an inordinate amount of time reconciling at the facility level, at the district level, the work, and I don't want to say it's sort of so much the work of the board, but the work of policy governance and ends monitoring. So I appreciate the frustration. And I also look at the district too and saying there's a lot of folks putting time in to interpret what seem to be very clear and very community-driven ends, with now a kind of an umbrella approach that's driven from the top down. And I don't know where the source of those ends are coming from, but we know ours came from our community.
Right.
Well, and not even just our community. The last exercise we had was really emphasizing the involvement of the administration and the building administrators and such. So, because that felt like that was kind of missing for our first rendition of the ends, and now that should be there. So,
Well, the board holds me accountable to that end, the end's outcomes, and so I mean that's in the true policy governance. It's directly to me, so it's how are you progressing, on meeting or articulating the meeting events, and so part of the struggle is that we set targets, but we have been governed also by these external targets. Now I could say, forget it, we're just going to stick with ours, and then I become out of compliance and put you in in a non-compliance place in other areas. So
I think you're in an impossible
Well,
position,
no,
actually. I mean,
but part of the conversation here is that I want to get out of that place, and whether it's me or whomever precedes me, I want to get in a place where, and whoever board members come on board, I want to have a process by which you can say, this is what we say we do, and here's the information that shares that we're doing it or not. And right now, it's a very confusing sea, and I think there's an opportunity through conversation with you to try to clean that up and to stick to it around how we're going to assess that with clarity, with all of the moving parts. Because again, it's complicated, although I think there's a solution here, and it needs to be understood.
And part of that will be articulated in 2.10, because the curriculum work that's happening right now really is around the proficiency-based graduation requirements required by the state, which you, in the end, will have to approve what those graduation proficiencies are. But there's an inordinate amount of work happening at the high school, really, that we will share with you that it's really to get at what you want. But unfortunately, it really has been a moving target. I mean, I wish I could just give you a report and say, here it is. It's not from lack of people working towards the ends.
Well, part of that is you don't hear that, so you're feeling of progression, right? And I think this talks to Martin's point of it being on a more regular basis. We've been probably, poor in that category. If we were having that more in front of you, you'd be able to hear
Right.
progress, concerns, questions,
Right.
etc.
No, I
So
think
I think
that's
it's a good idea.
Yeah, I wonder if we're looking at the agenda, are we still looking at the agenda?
Yes.
I wonder if we actually need, especially if we have master planning, and I know we need that on there, if we really need city-school collaboration every time, because our collaboration right now is kind of master planning.
Yeah.
Well, yeah,
I think that's fair. It could go in the same bucket.
you could be
Yeah.
master planning / city school
Yeah,
or
I
something.
mean,
Yeah. There are times I think that are going to be relevant just to report out to the board some of the things that are happening. I mean,
Well, then that could
But
be
that
part
could
of the
be an
superintendent
added,
report
yeah.
or an added. I just don't think that's the kind of thing we need to hear
yep,
every time.
every
So,
time.
Now, on monitoring reports, if Julie and I are reviewing 2.5 with John this week, when is that actually on the schedule?
next month.
not,
It's not.
Well,
on
it's
there.
not the
Oh,
18th,
it's
it's
not?
the
I thought
following
that
one.
was,
Well, that one's huge. So I think it's on the
Further out?
March one.
so we have,
So are either of the monitoring reports that are due here, 2.8 and 2.10, granted, we don't have a lot of time, but should either of those be deferred and addressed with a subcommittee to get at your original comment, Stuart?
I would think that certainly 210 it would be helpful. I think it would help guide some additional clarity conversation at the board that would be most beneficial if you had a couple folks.
I'd be
doing it.
happy to take a look at it. I don't think I can schedule a meeting, but if you want to send it, I'd be happy to look at it.
Okay.
I'd be happy to do it if it's not gonna be on the 18th. I mean, I could actually sit down a week from Monday, if that's at all
That'd be
helpful.
great.
Does that work?
So
So
it
send
sounds
it-
like we ought to take that one off the 18th, and we'll
Mhm.
try to get a subcommittee review, at least virtual review.
So do you want me to not do it if it's not?
No,
gonna
he's
be on
just
the-
saying that,
Well, this
No,
is
but
your
if
last
it's not on the
chance.
18th, if it's on March 4th, I
Oh,
won't
right.
be able to weigh in.
Right. Dan?
I could do it.
All right, so Dan and I will do,
I'd
you're
love
right,
to
you're
just
right.
take a look at it, though, and
Yeah,
provide
yeah,
feedback.
give
Well,
us
then-
feedback.
But-
And you are
I
on.
just, I mean, I can
Give us,
provide
give us your
feedback.
thoughts.
Yeah,
Yeah.
but I just
Give them to
can't
Stuart either way.
speak with any
Yep.
So you got three of them.
capacity.
Dan Martin and
that's a
Should be
quorum.
careful what you
Should
ask.
have had Patrick.
Should be careful what you ask for.
I know, I was thinking.
so move that 210
Yeah,
to the next meeting.
okay. And then is there a general consensus of the board that we should add as a standard agenda item, progress on ends monitoring? And we could kick that off with whatever recommendations you wanted to bring
Sure.
up?
Mhm.
I will take that as consensus.
Are we adding that to this?
Yeah, well, they will start to be a reoccurring or once every
I don't think
couple-
it has to be on this one
I,
yet.
yeah, I would want to kick it off maybe with 2.10
Right.
as a
March.
way of,
First
Okay.
week of March.
So we'll say March.
that monitoring report could really
Yeah.
address that, since that is about the curricular alignment with ends.
Okay.
So I really
Yeah, and the only caveat I give on starting
tell.
to add a lot of standardized agenda items is,
Well, that's why we're kicking off the city school one, see?
Well,
well,
we can-
yes,
we-
but they end up,
Combine
I
it.
think, content-wise, sometimes become a little superfluous, because you're gonna see, you'll see it the next time. So there has to be a lot of attention paid to substantive discussions.
Yeah.
Right, and that's why I think city-school collaboration should go, because we haven't heard substantively on that for,
We haven't met in a long time.
right. Yeah.
Okay. Anything else on the February 18th agenda? Okay.
Okay, thank you.
Anything on future agenda items?
And
Aren't a couple of these gonna be subsumed by the
Yeah.
monitoring report
Right.
2.10? So we'll actually get those out of here, but not next time?
Correct.
Following. Cool.
But I think your point was if there was any other additional.
Yes, anything. All right, we'll move on to the minutes of the January 22nd meeting. Any comments or changes? Okay, seeing none, those are approved. And we'll move on to the consent agenda.
So maybe just a brief moment, just to, obviously, longtime employee Joe Maley is our social studies curriculum area supervisor, has obviously, has submitted his resignation. And again, he's been a valuable member to the high school and, again, made a decision to do that. And also Sue Luck, the Rick Marcotte Central School principal, has also submitted her resignation as well. Obviously, both of those are fairly good-sized positions. I know Patrick, through consultation with me, had asked about board representation or board member representation, at least during the interview process. And I know some of you have responded to that. I'm not.
that was for,
This is
that
for
was for the
Jill.
math
Yeah,
one.
so what I'm gonna say is that this would be similar to that,
Oh, okay.
you know? So for the CAS, Patrick has asked, but he would likely do the same here. And again, I think I leave it under our kind of organizational structure and chart. These are positions that I think warrant, a nice opportunity to include a board member at that level. And I don't want to say that for every position in the district we would do that, but I think this warrants a nice opportunity to have a board member participate in the interview process, not selection of candidates and all that, but I think that would be really important.
When's that gonna kick off?
Patrick will come out with likely a plan here within the next couple of weeks, as far as the process, timeline, et cetera. So I envision him sending something similar to you around board representation. Now, I want to be sensitive to your time, but again, we believe that this is an important position, particularly given the load and responsibilities of that position. So that's.
Someone come forward for the math?
I think, I haven't heard exactly, Patrick said there's a couple, and said, hey, if you don't find anyone else, I can. So I think he's got some names from some of you that have said, sure, I'd be willing to if nobody else comes forward or something like that.
Can we wait until the meeting on the 4th to decide which board member, when we have a newly constituted board?
Yeah,
Well, the interviews.
No,
for
that's
Starting, I
math
think.
are
Oh,
Oh,
happening
that's already
soon.
happening.
Yeah.
The
Yeah.
math one's already happening.
so
But the
he'll be
select
back
one
in
will.
touch. Again, I don't need to interfere with his email connection to you, but I know that that's a reach out. I'm just wanting to say that would be similar. And then the Sue Luck, obviously, that's a more recent announcement. My plan here is that I'll meet with all of the staff. I think I meet with them next Monday, and just let them know that obviously we're certainly all aware that Sue has submitted her resignation, and basically let them know that a process will be unfolding, and what questions do you have? I want them to feel included in the process. Any questions, concerns that they may have, they may bring up master planning and visioning, they may, staffing levels, they may bring up a whole lot of different questions.
So do you have a plan for that position that you're gonna share with us? Because there are people, specifically people at Rick Marcotte, that are pretty concerned about that with the talk in the master planning.
So no, I'd be happy to share with you, my thinking, my rationale and plan for that position, and as I roll that out. Certainly, first and foremost, I want to let them know that I'm in receipt of her resignation. I want to let them at least have a little bit of talk time with me. Karen Dancher would likely come along. We would then begin to draft out a timeline. I would share with you and let you know kind of what I'm doing, why I'm doing it, and let you be informed of that process. So, anyway.
Good. And yeah, I mean, on behalf of the board, I think we thank both Joe and Sue for their years of service and their contributions to the students in the community of South Burlington. Please pass that on, and we'll
Yeah,
make
we
sure we
usually
get
do that.
some acknowledgement.
Yeah.
Great. All right, any comments on AP orders 27 and 28? All right, seeing none, I'll move on to the AP order to J. Hutchins Incorporated Excavating in the amount of $70,404.53. Looks like you need board action on
Yes.
that.
So this is the final amount needed for, this is the Orchard drainage related matter.
David, it's not the final amount, it's interim. It's all the work that's been completed.
Thus
today.
far.
Yes, there's about 20,000
In hold.
left in for the spring.
Okay, thanks, Ron.
And the, I know this wasn't a budget item, but what did we free up in order to fund this?
We temporarily used the $100,000 of the excess staff contribution to the retirement fund, pending review of all the finances of the district to reimburse that, so.
Yep. Okay. All right, so do I have a motion to approve
I'll make
the
that motion.
AP order?
Second?
Any further discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
And the motion passes.
Great, thanks.
All right, we can pass our self-evaluations to
Self-evaluation.
Martin.
That's efficient.
Thanks.
Where's mine? Okay. Except for the
I
last
think we'll do executive. There's some stuff to sign.
Yeah.
One in there is the thing we talked about around changing board.
Dave, did you want to make those announcements for the meeting?
Oh, right. Right, we didn't do announcements, did we?
Okay, just real quickly, we had one disagree about the board following the principles of policy governance, focusing on established general expectations with appropriate limitations, allowing administration to focus on the operational details. We have a couple no opinions, but we're not going to report those. With respect to superintendent feedback, there's some no opinions. There is a disagree about data reports being provided. Actually, there are two disagrees about data reports being provided. School choice and the big picture information was not provided in advance. And there's a thank you for coordinating the meeting with the Chamberlain Family Night. It was great to feel the energy and excitement of the evening, and thank you to David, John, and the team for all of the hard work on the budget materials, and I second that as well. That's it.
Okay, thank you. Any, you want to do announcements?
Yeah, we should just do announcements.
Okay.
Obviously, have it at your place. PAC Dialogue Nights information are there, so again, if you're interested in participating or coming to those, the 16th of February and the 17th of March. Again, there's some things on here of other activity. Orchard School Math Nights, February 6th, again, right up this week. And then reminder that winter break is coming along as well. Hard to believe, but February 23rd through 27th.
Yeah.
So,
And that replaces with your invitations to the Fine Art Dessert.
yes, thank you,
Thanks.
thank you. I
And
saw
there's
people looking at
An
that.
amazing violinist, I know.
Ah,
Will
that's
be
right.
playing a solo at some point
Nice.
during the evening, and amazing guitar player as well.
Yeah, she didn't know that.
Not together, yeah. Actually, that was me.
All right, I will take a motion to go into executive session to discuss a potential legal claim in the district's investigation and labor negotiations with teachers and support staff on the grounds that premature general public knowledge would clearly place the board at substantial disadvantage.
So,
Travis, all in favor?
Aye.